Well, hello to my Sunday school friends. I hope you are well. It is really good to see you and to continue this walk through the Old Testament stories that you and I and all people who love Jesus really need to know so that we can appreciate who Jesus is and where he came from and what God was doing to bring him to the world and all of those things that we've talked about before. We've been talking about the prophet Elisha for the last, 5 or 6 weeks, something like that. And today we're going to do the most famous story about Elisha. This is a goodie. All right, so during the time of Elisha, there was a country north of Israel, Syria, that was an enemy of Israel. And the Syrians would sometimes raid into Israel, and they would take whatever they wanted, whatever they could. Their army would come sweeping down, and they would take stuff, and they sometimes would take people and make those people slaves. So the leader of those armies was a guy named Naaman, and he was really a good general. He was really a good military commander, and his king loved him because Naaman was honorable to his king, took care of the king, would often go to church with a king. I mean, it was to an idol. It wasn't to the Lord God, but would take the king to the church to do their beliefs in the church. And Naaman was just a wonderful helper to the king. And Naaman got leprosy. Leprosy is a terrible skin disease. If you get leprosy, you can't be in society anymore. You have to live outside of town. You have to yell, unclean, unclean. People were terrified of getting leprosy. It was a whole range of different skin diseases, but some of them were really, really, really bad. And so Naaman got leprosy, and he was so scared. And his wife was scared, and his household was scared. And one of the members of his household was a little girl that had been stolen from Israel and made a slave, that she was now sort of the attendant or the helper of Naaman's wife. And apparently they had treated her kindly because she cared that Naaman was sick. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't glad that Naaman had this disease. And she said to her mistress, she said to Naaman's wife, if only our master would go to Samaria, there's a prophet there who could heal him of his leprosy. Well, that's crazy talk, right? Nobody can heal someone of leprosy. Well, the wife went to Naaman, and Naaman went right to his king, and the king was thrilled that there was some hope for this servant that he loved so much, the commander of his armies. So the king said to Naaman, you will go to Israel. I'm going to send a letter to the king so that he will heal you. Remember, the king of Syria, he didn't know about God. He didn't know about God's prophets. He thought that the most important person must be the king. The most able person, the strongest person must be the king. So he sent a letter to the king that the king of Israel should heal Naaman. This is what the letter said. When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent you my servant Naaman, that you may cure him of his skin disease. And he didn't just send Naaman. He sent a lot of gifts to the king as well. He sent 10 talents of silver. Think of a talent as a weight. But for our purposes, think of a laundry basket filled with silver. 10 laundry baskets filled with silver, 6,000 shekels of gold. That's about, $3.33 million, right? It is a tremendous amount of money, and 10 of the fanciest sets of clothes that you have ever seen in your whole life. So he sent those with that letter to the king, and Naaman, he and his chariots and his servants and the wagons and all these gifts and all that money stopped outside the king's palace. The letter got sent in. The king of Israel read that letter, and he could not believe his eyes. I mean, that was crazy talk, right? How am I supposed to heal this guy of his leprosy? And Naaman and his servants and all their animals and the wagons and all that money and all those clothes are sitting outside waiting. And the king of Israel thought, the king of Syria is just trying to start a war with me. I'm not God. I can't cure anybody of leprosy. And he was so upset that he tore his clothes, right? That was a way, if you were crazy upset, You would tear your clothes. You'd put ashes on your head and tear your clothes. Well, Elisha sent a message to the king. Why have you torn your clothes? Tell the guy to come to me. Oh, how did Elisha know this? God must have whispered it to him, right? But the king was delighted. And he sent a messenger out to Naaman saying, you don't want me, you want the prophet Elisha. This is his address. Go to him right now, toot sweet. And so Naaman and his servants and his wagons and his horses, they all went down the road to Elisha's house. Now, when they got there, Elisha didn't even come out. Didn't even come out to see all the show, to see this important man, all these servants, all these horses, all these chariots, all these wagons, all that money, all those clothes. Didn't even come out. Sent a servant out. And the servant said to him, you Naaman? Naaman, yeah. My master says, go dip in the Jordan River 7 times and your leprosy will be cleared. Thank you very much. And he went back in the house. Naaman was crazy mad. He said, I thought that the man of God would come out and wave his hand over the spots and make them disappear and cure me up. He didn't even have respect for me to come out. I'm going home. I am not going to bathe in the Jordan River. I'm not going to dip myself in it 7 times. It's a muddy, ugly river. I got rivers back home that are much nicer, much cleaner. Come on, let's get out of here. I hate this place. So they started up the road. Naaman and his servants and chariots and the horses, the wagons and all that money and all those gifts. And one of the servants said to him, Father, he wasn't his dad, but that's how they talked to their master. One of the servants said, Father, what? If the man of God had told you to do something really difficult, would you have done it? Well, of course. Well, he just told you to go and dip yourself in a river 7 times. How hard is that? So Naaman calmed down. He knew he was being foolish, right? You and I, sometimes when we're angry, we're foolish. Naaman calmed down and he turned to the horses and the chariots and the wagons and the servants around. They went down to the Jordan River, and Naaman went down into the muddy waters of the Jordan River, and he came out and he was still covered with leprosy. Oh, he grumbled and he went back down a 2nd time, still had leprosy. 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, no change. He's just wet and crabby and leprous. But he went back down into the river 7 times. The servant, Elisha's servant, had told him, dip yourself 7 times. And when he came up out of the river, completely healed. His skin was like it had been when he was a little boy. It was perfect. He had not a spot or a blemish on him. There was no diseases. He was completely cured. Well, he couldn't believe it. So he turned everybody around, right? The wagons and the chariots and the horses and all that money and all those clothes. And he went back to Elisha's house. And Elisha came out. And Naaman said, now I know that there's no God in the whole world except the God of Israel. We're going to pick this up next week because the story is not finished. We're going to leave you with Naaman still a little bit wet, completely cured of his disease, standing in front of the prophet, knowing that the real God, our God, is the one true God. What do you think is going to happen next? What do you think Elisha is going to say? Do you think he's going to take all that money and all those clothes? Well, stay tuned. Talk to you next week. You take care. Bye-bye.